Okay. Here's what the order of conditions for the Herrimg Run Culvert project number DEP number SE 56-1040. And has everyone had a chance to look it over? Well, everybody's looking. I made one reference to notification to DMF and Pembroke Fisheries Superintendent or its designee to be notified in advance of the start date and when they're going to start and any changes. So if the fish are still running and there's an issue, we can catch it ahead of time rather than, find out they're there. So that is something that I would like to put in.
So is there a pre-construction hearing in that, like there was in the water wheel one?
It should be a pre-construction.
No, I'm pretty sure we had a pre-construction, which means you'll all be there before it starts.
Pre-construction conference including the applicant, engineers, DMF representatives, the commission's agent, and its review engineer. I can add in Herring Fisheries Superintendendent.
DMF in there, yeah, me too. Good, yeah, that.
I can add that in.
Yeah, put the designee in too, because the
Absolutely.
superintendent isn't always around. Okay, so we need a motion to accept with a couple minor alterations.
I move that we accept the special conditions, go with the SE 56-1040 Herring Run culvert job with the changes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. And, open space report. Got about
Since it's 7:10,
a minute. So is it 7:10 now?
Yeah, we can table it.
Okay. Let's start first hearing. Notice of intent for DEP number SE 56-104170 Old Cart Path Lane Extension. State your name for the record, sir.
It's Paul Seberg from Grady Consulting. He's an okay spot to set up. So I'm here for the notice of intent application for the subdivision roadway for Old Cart Path Lane Extension. Currently this site consists of an existing single-family house. It's located here. There's an existing driveway that comes off of Old Cart Path Lane up to the existing house here. It's wooded all throughout the property here, and also some maintained lawn area throughout the property in this area here. There's a brook that's along the southerly portion of the property line in a 200-foot riverfront area associated with that brook. There's also a bordering vegetated wetland that runs along the westerly portion of the property here. There are resource areas from approved ANRAD delineation that was recently extended at the last conservation hearing. What the applicant wishes to do is basically extend Old Cart Path Lane approximately 450 feet to a cul-de-sac shown here. Stormwater runoff of the proposed development will be routed to catch basins shown here and here, and 2 infiltration basins, one located here and one located here. In order to access the property with the subdivision roadway, we will have to come across the 200-foot riverfront area, which is shown here in red. We are proposing to serve approximately 10% of the riverfront area in order to access the lot. For erosion control, we're proposing silt sack erosion control along the down gradient portion of the disturbed area, shown here in red. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Anybody?
Is there a way that you don't have to encroach onto the riverfront area?
We looked at that, so kind of what we were seeing is in order to maintain the curve radius as far as planning board requires, I'm maximizing this radius here in order to bring it as far away from that riverfront area as possible. So we really did everything we could to try to get it out of that.
What if the
as much as
containment
possible.
area was moved to the north there?
Excuse me?
What if the catch basin was, if that's moved to the north?
So in order to get this curve, the planning board requires a minimum, or actually a maximum radius that you can have here for the roadway. So we're basically starting this curve right as we enter into the property to try to get as far away from this riverfront area as we can. So
All right,
that's
I
the,
see.
yeah, it's really the best we can do there.
I just got the changes to the reclamation. Can you explain what was done?
Right, so-
You just got copies.
So within the riverfront area, you're allowed to disturb up to 10%, or I think it's 5,000 square feet, whichever's greater. We originally were proposing to do some restoration within the riverfront area and use that to offset the disturbance. But DEP said basically that we can't use that to offset the disturbance, so what we did is basically shrunk our disturbance as much as we could to get kind of that 10%.
Okay, simple as that.
Yeah, I think it would have been better to have both, or, you know, have it the other way, but as far as the standards go, that's how we wanted to.
Do you have to reclaim any area because of that encroachment?
We do not have to, no.
Would you like to?
But because we are maintaining 100 foot of undisturbed within the inner riparian zone. So with that said, we don't have to do anything as far as any restoration. Help all together.
There are a number of trails coming off of Old Cart Path or
Right.
whichever we call it.
Yeah.
What effect does this subdivision have on the trails that have been in existence for so many years now?
So when I was out there, from what I saw, as far as the trails, they mainly came right through here. I didn't notice that many trails going into the property or this area here, but it seemed like there's kind of a trail that kind of runs along this property line here, out to this area here, this area here.
I mean, are those trails going to remain open? What's, in other words, from a town standpoint that have used these trails to get to that backland and just general nature walking,
Yeah.
is this project going to stop the entrance? Are we going to be unable to access our backlands that we've had for years in that area?
Well, there's still access off of Old Cart Path Lane right here to get to this trail that I can see in this area here. So that would maintain at that point there. But as far as, it's still private property. I'm not aware of any rights that some people may have that walk across those trails or.
So the trails are on, the entryway to the trail is on private property.
From what I
So
noticed is that.
people walking
Yeah.
through, unless it's known ahead, they won't know if they're, you know,
Right.
looters or trail walkers. So how do we handle that, Bob?
I'm not sure what where the private to public access exists in that area. I mean,
Doesn't work.
I think some people probably have some answers to that. I just want to make sure we bring it up, and then if someone has something that more to it before we get into it. I'd like to, just changing gears just for a minute. I think I would like to have this sent out to one of our experts to review it all, because a lot of this came in so quick, we haven't had time to really digest it. And we don't need to, we have the wetland lines already all taken care of.
Right.
But the actual verb part of what's written and how we're going to write it, we're in a very sensitive area. And we have by law the right to hire an expert to tell us what's best at your expense or at your friend's expense. And I think I'd like to exercise that right to have one of our experts just reread what you've written to make sure it agrees with what we want.
So do we need a motion?
Well, they have to, they can say no,
No?
and we can say no. Or they can say yes, and we'll hire an expert and then we'll try to iron it all out. So it's,
Yeah.
it's up to them to make the decision, but we're asking for them to give us permission to hire at their expense an expert to review what's in front of us.
Is that something you're all okay with, Steve?
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we've lived here for 20 years. People have been accessing that part of the path for the entire time that we have lived here and parked right in front of the former barn.
Yeah, that would be part of what the expert, we just
Right.
are not, none of us on this board are experts, or some of us might think we are, but
Right.
we aren't, and so we like to get the
I mean, there's
professional
no
help.
formal easement or rights of way that I'm aware of, certainly not in the deed. The deed doesn't even mention it.
That a possibility to make it a right of way, and that's why we're having the expert look at it.
They can dig into all that. I'm not
Yeah.
I know what I think, but I don't have any letters after my name that lets me be any of those.
Anybody have any questions? To ask?
Question to the room? Yes, Bruce Nichols, a butter from 145 Mountain Avenue. Been a resident for 50 years on the property abutting this property. Obviously, I'd like to just say, look, if I had bought that land on a positive note and I had the option to put in a house to send my kid to college, obviously, I don't think we have a right to say no, even though I don't want houses right in my backyard. That being said, I just want to make sure that we were here a couple of years ago for the same application, and they stated that the brook running behind our house and right off the edge of the property here was a non-running brook. I've been here for 50 years, since 1959. It was determined that it was a river, not a brook, I think is the correct terminology. I got film that I just went out there when I got to look at it. It's running strong. It has been running strong for 50 years. They were encroaching in on that brook, and it was asked that, and I can't remember the verbiage, it was like a 40-foot easement that they were looking for, but because it is a continually running river, they had to go to 100 feet. So I'm not sure if it's maintaining within those structures that were voted upon at that time, or whether they're looking for an easement to come closer. The other question that I wasn't even going to talk about is, when I grew up here hunting and fishing out in the back, I actually caught a trout in that river long ago. Since then, they stopped stocking down at Mountain Avenue where it goes under the river. I've not seen fish out there, but the river continually runs. Huge deer population. We had a right-of-way coming off of Mountain Avenue, right up at the very end, that comes right on the property line, Mr. Sayers' property and those that back up to it on Old Cart Path Lane. Over the years, when the houses were built, that has all been filled in. There is no access to it at all. The only access was where Old Cart Path Lane comes in to the property line. And there was going to be, the town conservation at one time was going to put a parking lot right there so that you could access that fire road and take the fire road up to the back of the school and the tennis courts, and fire access out to the rest of the property adjacent to that. But since then, there was a house built on that piece of property. So to get back to the initial point is that if houses are going to be built, is there any variance that is coming into the town that there is not enough land for the, if I was going to go build a house, it says you must have something like a half an acre lot or something like that. Are they looking for a variance because they are using minimum amount of land less than that for those three houses? One, and two, are they encroaching on wetlands and looking for a variance to go on the wetlands? It's very wet. Not to belay the story, my dad bought the property adjacent to it to build a house out back when he could afford to support his children, and he was denied the access road that comes in off of Mountain Avenue because it was wetlands. I purchased the house in the 70s after my father passed away, and I was surprised when the town took that right-of-way by eminent domain to build a road that they denied my father for rear access to the high school.
Yeah.
They could not do it because it's wetlands. It was impractical, impossible to build the land, to build on that road, to build a road on that land. Since then, the town put in Tara Drive across the street. There is 2 huge culverts that come in and feed that wetland for drainage for the town. It comes down Tara, runs onto Mountain Avenue, and then runs into that. It's continually wet when, you know, when it rains, when it's wet season. It needs to be cleaned at this point, but it's always been a wetland. And the house that's closest to the wetland there, we know other people who have since passed and lived on. There's almost an underground river. I should have got the number of the land. I don't know if there's really such a thing as an underground river, but it's continually wetland right through there. Does this land have to perk before a house is built? Or do you give the application okay and then they go to try to perk? Because, hon, can you remember the lot where we used to go for the party, for the boat races? On Old Cart Lane, there was a house that we used to go for a party every year when we had the races at Hanson. We could not do it at certain times because the backyard was just filled with water, literally underwater. And it came right across on Mountain Avenue, about 4 or 5 houses down from me, and then went over to Cart Path Lane. Always a wet problem. So that begs the question, will that land perk? And do you perk before you give them the right to build, or do you give them the right to build and then they go to perk for a system that, I don't know how. The other 2, because of course Mr. Say has a house and I'm sure it perked and he has a sewage system, I don't know how you could put the 3rd one to the wetlands, and if you do, what kind of problem, whatever septic system you put in, that's uphill. It all runs right into the wetlands, all runs right into the river. So as long as it meets the amount of land necessary, the setback from the wetland, and there's adequate sewerage so that it doesn't just leach into the wetland. That's my concern.
I think that's a question for you to answer, but I'll just throw a little in. Some of
See-
that is not in our jurisdiction,
Right.
but we want to be aware of it. And so I think the engineer can do it in the current, they're not gonna spend all the money unless they're sure they're gonna get the house lot.
Right, so to answer your question, yes, it has to perk before we can build a house. So we will have to file perk applications with the Board of Health and a separate design with the Board of Health before they can actually build the house. As far as setbacks, and you mentioned variances, we're not requesting any variances or any sort of setbacks or also reduction in area. The septic system for this lot here, you mentioned closest to the wetlands.
Right.
In order to build a septic system on the lot, you have to be with at least 100 feet from the wetlands to actually build the septic system.
From the wetlands,
Yes.
not the river, the wetlands.
The wetlands,
Yeah.
correct. And the river's down here, the wetlands do run pretty close in this area here, but we do have to maintain a 100-foot setback for that resource here.
That's what I remember from that meeting a couple of years ago. And that's detailed on there?
Yes.
What is the red? Is that you are actually invading the wetlands in that red area?
The red area is basically within 200 feet of the riverfront, the brook that's right here.
Yeah.
So the brook has a 200-foot riverfront area associated with it, and that's what they determined at that last hearing that I think you went to a while back. So they determined that that was a brook, it was a river, and it does have that 200-foot setback associated with it. DEP does allow for you to disturb up to 10% of that riverfront area, or 5,000 square feet, whichever is greater. So that's what we're doing in this case. We're disturbing 10,000 square feet just to get this roadway in here, in this portion right here. We are maintaining a 100-foot buffer between the natural buffer between the brook and the proposed work.
And that's to the river, and just
Right.
for the drainage ditch that's out there, for the town culverts that run into that right-of-way that they took by eminent domain, is that established also a footage that's necessary from that where that is a drainage that the town uses to maintain Mountain Avenue, Terra Drive, and so on and so forth. Has anybody looked at that? Again, do I want to see the houses in my backyard? No. But, I mean, we have to be frank here. Again, I state, somebody buys the land, they want to put a house. This is what my father did 50 years ago. It was denied for him at the time, and then they took the land and wanted to do the same thing. So I have a grudge against the town for that, a 50-year grudge. But I don't begrudge somebody that owns the land and needs to build a house for himself, putting your kids through school, for whatever. I can see the other two houses up there seem to be clear of any impedance at all. I question the third house where it encroaches so much onto the wetland, and I cannot believe that there's any kind of a leaching field that can be made for that house to not have an impact on the wetlands.
Can you explain the septic system, how
Yeah, so basically, we have done soils testing in this area already, and the soils on the site are actually very good soils. They do have a good infiltration rate. So we'll be maintaining that 100-foot setback to the resource area. The system will consist of basically septic tank, 1,500-gallon septic tank, which will be routed to a distribution box, which will be routed into 2 leaching trenches. They have to maintain a 5-foot separation to groundwater. So at that point in time, once the effluent infiltrates through that 5-foot groundwater separation, which is sand, it will basically be treated, and at that point, it wouldn't have any effect on the resource area. And it also have to travel very far horizontally to actually make it to that resource area. Typically, it will drop vertically more so than horizontally.
I wish I had done my due diligence. I know my next door neighbor is here. If you went from his property 1 to the third house down, I know that was just sold recently, and I looked at it knowing beforehand from my lifelong residency here, they have their downspouts and out. They are always pumping water out of that cellar continually. And I mean, that does back right up to those 2 proposed houses, never mind the third one that's on the wetlands. So it's extremely wet out there. Again, if Mr. Saya has his house there, obviously he perked, he has a septic system that's working. But I mean, the ground can only hold so much. And I just want to point that out to the conservation and to the town hall, that that just needs to be looked at. And I hope they just take that into consideration. Again, I don't know, I'm not a general engineer and so on and so forth. My dad was a carpenter, my son's a carpenter. We go through wetlands with his building things all the time, and leaching fields and so on and so forth. And the last thing that anybody wants to do is build a house that you have to put in French drains and you're pumping water out of it 90% of the time. So I just hope that I'm not saying this right, I was going to say that the engineering, obviously the engineers know what they're doing and what it can accept and so on and so forth, but Mother Nature sometimes can be a bitch. So I just don't see how that third house, that close to the wetlands, could function, you know, when I know other people have water conditions. And I'd like to give the room, I don't know if anybody right along there from Mountain Avenue can talk to their water in their cellar conditions. I know I'm right down, again, house was built in 1959, bought the land, it is lowland. My dad knew it next to the time. We actually did not even have to dig the foundation. We actually leveled it, did the foundation, and then backed up to the front. I have a driveway, access just goes down, and there's a garage in the cellar. I've always maintained that property that is now the town's, and when it rains, I have to be I've graded it over the years and just keep the slope going off to the wetlands, because I will flood my cellar if it just isn't kept just right. If branches come down and it keeps that water from running off into that runoff area, we are right on the borderline. So
Do you have a plot plan of that particular lot?
Well, I don't think we're here only for subdivision, is that correct?
Right, just for the road.
We're not accepting lots, all the lots
We
will
will
have
be
to
doing
come
an
back
individual
before
filing for
us.
that lot.
Right?
We'll be doing an
Just
individual
another
filing.
filing on that lot.
Another
so-
filing?
So
Okay.
we're really talking about, though it is part of, we're not approving that lot at this time for a house. We're looking at the subdivision.
Okay.
And the other thing is, yes, in town, there's a lot of low areas. Some of the engineers have been, and I don't mean this derogatory, some of the engineers are smart enough, to put the houses high enough that they keep the cellars dry. And that's been what I've seen in this town. When they bring those foundations high enough to start with, the cellars stay dry. When they try to cut on the amount of fill they need to bring in around the house and save a few dollars, then they get into the problems of the wet cellars and pumping.
Okay. Do we need to vote for?
Well,
continuance?
did we get an okay to hire our,
Yes.
I think everything we've said
I
here is
thought-
what is based on what our wetlands experts say about what's there
Yep.
and what can be done. So I don't think we should be doing, accepting or not accepting anything other than perhaps postponing it to a future date when we can get input from people that we use for this purpose.
So we will, what?
I motion that we postpone this discussion of, or continue this discussion of 70 Old Park Lane until we have the, what do you call this?
Yeah.
Independent review done of the property?
Peer review.
Peer review?
Yep. Need a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Okay. That's that.
Bob, do we have a list of the people that are here?
I do have a sign-up sheet back here, but I don't think we signed it.
Are they gonna file separate, this part and the other one? Or are they gonna be filed so we can actually see the bigger scope? I mean, if these properties are butters, I think possibly it would be wise for us to look at the big whole picture. And that the peer review actually includes the other property. Because it's dividing comment. I just spend rather, my opinion, see one bigger project, which is development of between whole past. Yeah, I don't want to see a portion, because I mean, the wetlands is served for flood retainage. It sounds like there's some flooding issues. It's not just localized here, it goes downstream. So the more water runs through the system, I think is possible, you know. It's not just a little water here, and a little water here, well, now we have water, right? I don't know enough about it.
You need help?
They're looking at the whole
You can't motion to send us to me.
We weren't gonna call it.
Oh, it's not a motion.
No, you know.
No, I was asking.
But you can say, you can direct.
I think I said, I should be asking.
That's right.
I'm supposed to have a visit by Michael Buckley.
We schedule it for the next meeting.
Okay,
Cross that
and we have discussion on the wild parsley.
You did help order your own, direct people outside of this meeting.
Order in the room, please. Excuse me. Thank you.
So what are you doing?
Oh, what are we doing? The wild parsnip removal, do we, as ongoing business?
So I wrote up the letter, it's there for your approval. If you guys accept that letter, I'll send it over to Board of Health. I think it was just the one copy was circulating around.
The meeting materials?
Yes, right
There
there.
was a beautiful letter there
And if
to,
everyone accepts that, then I'll send that over to them tomorrow.
To the health department.
the health department to have them get involved more than us. I think control the flow.
Ask for
Yeah, we can pay for it. Well, they have other properties too that need
Right, this
remediation.
is for, I believe we should have it for wild parsnip and poison ivy town-wise.
Right.
And then let them,
Yeah.
and we'll break it down to where it is, not just say it's
Locations, yes.
one little location.
Yeah, because some of it isn't in conservation,
Right.
but it's a health issue regardless. So that should be a policy of some kind. Poison ivy and parsnip remediation.
Eradication.
Yeah. Okay, we want to get back to the open
Agents
space.
report first.
Excuse me?
Agents report first, go in
Oh,
order.
yeah.
I still haven't read this
But
letter,
actually-
so
Yeah.
we haven't voted to
Bob-
approve it again. No.
Already,
Yeah.
I already mentioned that he didn't have
Yeah,
much
everything.
to report.
Is there a letter I need to read, please?
But, yeah, that was it.
Well, maybe another agent report. We have had DEP once, the commission or me to look into a possible filling to get the pass down by the Herrimg. Now, have you people been in on the backs, on the lower side at all?
Of which?
Down by the Herrimg. Now, we're going in what was, what I call Fisher property, Tom property, after you go by the Herrimg Run, the long road that goes in the left down in there. There's an ongoing battle in that area between neighbors all the time. And we, for 8 or 10 years, have been getting various reports, one to the other. And DEP gave us, said someone was reporting that there was some filling going in on the far end. So we're planning to go down and look, but I mean, it's a big area to look without having something more than that. I didn't
We have a
know.
drone we can use.
Huh?
We have a drone we can use. We have a drone that we can use.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
wrong.
well,
When the
that,
trees are there.
with the trees there, they should have, I want to first get from DEP, one of their maps that shows change,
Right.
wetland change map, see if there's anything in there. I think it's probably just the neighbors fighting again, but, it's every year or two we end up with this kind of thing in there. I didn't know if you people had been in there at all on that side of the river, because that's the other side of the river.
Right.
What are the neighbors? So we have, it's the far property that goes very far into it,
Yeah.
right? So is the neighbor Wildlands Trust, or is it like
Yes.
local?
No, well, it says,
It borders Wildlands Trust, it was 143.
Okay, so is it Wildlands Trust filing complaint, or is it another?
We don't know.
abutter? It's just a random abutter?
yeah, it came from DEP to us. In other words, whoever it is jumped over us and went to DEP.
Okay.
But that's happened before down there. I mean, you get these places where you have different neighbors fighting, and they use whatever they can to make it miserable for the other side and all. And this is one that's been going on for years. So before I put my boots on and got in too deep, I like to know what we're dealing with. And I didn't know whether you people had been in there and seen anything at all.
I haven't seen on that side. We just cleaned the brook and clear.
Last time I flew over there and it looked beautiful. I didn't see any
Yeah,
disturbance.
well, that's what I think, that's what I'm looking, but I haven't been
This
able
was
to
a
get
couple
my
of years ago.
plans, but yeah, we'll be doing it, and I already talked to Gino, one of these days, very quickly, when we get some of these things, if it looks like there's nothing, we'll go down and look, and if not, then we'll say, tell us more.
Do they have they don't have a location, like longitude, latitude, like they usually do
It's
in the
140,
NOIs?
all it tells us is the address on,
Did they
Oh,
send
The two that are fighting, so the ones that are fighting, we should go to their backyards
first.
Well, yeah, but you gotta, see, we gotta get some permission before we can do all.
Oh, yeah,
We can't
well,
just
we
go-
can go down the road.
Yeah,
You fly over it with no problem.
yeah, well, I say we can do it, it's just,
Is the road private? Can we,
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's all
we can go
private.
down the road and,
yeah, I've been down in there and saw no major work, but that doesn't mean,
could we request a picture?
well, that's what we'll do, I'm going to do as soon as I get hold of DEP and ask
If they're
them,
really complaining,
give us what you got before we
Make sure
stick our neck out again.
Bolster their case, you know, and take us off the hook, or give us a direct, you know, what we're looking at before we go there.
I say it's happened so many times, it isn't like, usually if I get a call, I'll be there as quickly as I can to try to stop something. This is one of the ones that we've been in and out over the last 12, 14 years, you know, on a regular basis, between the building department, ourselves, the Board of Health, you know, it's around and around and around, so. Whatever it is, there was no big machinery working way down in when I went in there Friday.
Okay. Ronald, did you have something you wanted to say?
So the complaint came from a neighbor purchasing land plan with DEP directly, and DEP informed us.
Yeah. And that's not always unusual either. That happens a lot of times. And just so we get the board knows, every so often we get calls from Boston, you know, from the feds. Somebody who, they just, you know, somebody that knows somebody somewhere goes up and it comes down and they're gonna go back and forth. But it isn't always, you know.
But that report doesn't come with any documentation, or they just said, hey, this is a
No.
complaint.
Just
that's
an
it.
informal email that they sent us
Yeah.
to see if we had heard anything about it, to take a look into it.
So we really can't do anything, and we're not obligated to really do anything if we don't know where it is. It's like-
Well, what we have, and I thought I had the letter in my, what is
It
it?
was 143 Barker Street.
Yeah, 143 Barker Street is what the DEP address is what they said. The people behind 143.
It said that one of the neighbors of that property had complained that some of the wetlands had been filled in so that someone could get a horse and cart across it, and that it bordered the Wildlands
And
Trust.
that if it's not got drainage under it, then it would also impede the draining.
They
It would
were,
change the hydrology.
yeah, they were asking if we had heard anything, so very preliminary stages right now.
But the trails, I mean,
Okay.
we're just gotta look into it, that, again, but just if you hear things, that's what we're doing. But it is, you know, most of that land has got Wildlands Trust land around it. It's,
Now, we can walk on that, but.
So was this an announcement report, or we know exactly who registered the
We
plan?
don't know who
Okay.
registered it.
but again, I would hate to think that Wildlands Trust, if
Well,
they
it's a
have a
neighbor.
problem with their neighbor, you know, either they come to us before going to DEP. We are working with them fairly close most of the time. I mean,
So, I mean, one, I think I like to see if we can identify the source. So, you know, being anonymous reporting doesn't really solve anything. But if we can identify the source, they can actually pinpoint something. And then if it's pinpointed to a rough geographic area, how does our board get involved with, all right, we're gonna do a site walkthrough. There's been a complaint of this, we do it and we go, does it look right? Does it pass the sniff test, right? I think there's something, like, there's been Phil, why? All right, well, would you be interested in, you know, to prove your innocence, paying for one of these three contractors like this peer review person had to just do, and just say, does this soil that's been placed here, potentially on this path, which could look like fill, I don't know if it's fill, I have never seen the site, right? And then say, let's do a soil analysis. Is this something that's natural to this area or not? Yes, no? I don't know how this board goes forth with it.
usually we don't even have to go anywhere near that.
Normally,
Never
when
had to go
somebody
there.
buries wetlands, they don't bother to dig out the vegetation
Right.
and remove the stump, they just bury it.
Yeah.
And that's not the right method. So you see where they haven't dug out the topsoil to put fill in, to put
Right.
topsoil back on, it's illegal.
But most of these paths are nothing but old hunter paths
Right.
to begin with. And in this particular case, So I don't know if anyone's been in the driveway in the last few years, but, it's,
Don't they sell eggs?
it's just about in the wetland all the way, I mean.
Right, well, it
It's,
is. It's a low spot.
Yeah, the whole driveway, this driveway is gonna be, what, half mile long?
Yeah.
Or more?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't wanna be driving in it anytime, but, you know, when I can see what's going on, it's that, I've got better roads around the house, and woods than here, but it's gonna, this place was built in there quite a while ago by a fellow that, built Boston Whaler, Dick Fisher. Dick Fisher used to sit on this commission at the very beginning. He's one of the original ones. I don't know how he built it. Well, I'm not getting into that part of it at all. That was long before my time.
I had a thought that everybody and every contractor that's gonna build a home, put in septic, they all have to come through us. So is there any way that, like, we got a builder, order of conditions can include notice to the homeowner that, so the homeowner knows, because some people buy a house, everything's done for them, and they move in and they can go in the backyard and start cutting trees. Can they be made aware, or are they made aware that they are in conservation and they can't, there's certain things that they can't
Our blanket
do?
order of conditions, up until just recently, had a thing that any time the property changed hands, the buyers had to sign
The wetlands disclaimer.
Okay,
disclosure statement.
So the original owner and the next owner in line
And it's supposed to be
are
in the deed that
notified.
anytime
In
it's
the-
changed, they're supposed to notify the people that then sign this and.
Right, okay, I just had a thought.
Again-
that I didn't know if it was. but
Again,
that's fine.
because of,
When
We
did
have-
that happen?
I'm just, our system for filing all of these things in the past has not been the best because of the overload of work and the amount of hours we had for administrative work. So the follow through on all of them is not there, but any of the ones that are at first time or two, it is in the file. In other words, if you're the developer of a development, your paperwork says that you have to make sure that the buyer of that house understands that they're buying a house that has wetland, has area that was of concern to the Conservation Commission.
How do we know that that's done? Do they have a piece of paper that we get and put in the
Yes,
file?
that's what we're getting back, right. Now, this is.
When we build also, there's supposed to be a 4x4 piece of wood with
Right.
a notice on it.
On all of the newer stuff now, on all of the
Not to
corners
go
of the
past
lots.
this point, that it's, you can't build, put clippings or anything.
And that is the builder's responsibility.
That's the builder's,
and
it's in the
engineers.
order of conditions, it's
Right.
part of what they do when they get their certificate of
Perfect.
compliance. So it's, yeah, we're working at it, but it's a big project to try to catch up for 50 years of not having done that. Maybe not, I'm just correct, 50, whatever the number is, and unfortunately, we have not had a administrative staff with time to go even take care of what they were doing, never mind going back and trying to redo what hadn't been done when there was no one sitting in the office all the time. And for a long time, all we had was people like Melissa who would be here for this meeting and come in for 4 hours the next day to do the paperwork, and that was it. And that didn't, it's a big town, there's a lot, as you can tell by your numbers, just in the notice of, on the orders of conditions,
Yeah, I saw.
we're 1,050 something there, and that's not doing determinations and so forth, which are almost double that. It's a lot of paperwork, but nobody has, scratch nobody. It's been hard to get enough people concerned of what was going on to pay for the amount of work that needed to get done. Well, it's being changed all the time. Right now, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna give words too. Don't get rid. She's been doing one hell of a job
I know.
in the few weeks she's been in there.
I've been telling, I can't.
I come in and see her sitting on the floor at the bottom of a file cabinet, filing paperwork, which I hadn't seen by anyone else. Not that they weren't doing their job, but when it got down to that bottom drawer where you had to sit on the floor and do it, that paperwork stood up on the top of the file.
Thank you
in
for doing
blocks.
that.
Trying to get it all squared away.
All right.
Melissa, do you have
Found
anything you
the
want to
attic
talk
yet?
about?
Not one bit.
No,
Thank you.
you-
We have
Found the attic.
have a lady sitting over there.
The
Do you wanna
archive.
Talk to the whole board
I'm not
about
there
it?
yet. The attic's a
So
little
I
much.
just, came,
Taking notes? Can I read
Sure.
them afterwards so I can learn something?
if you can read it. I don't know as if I got a notice for wetlands.
What
I've
did
been in
you
my
do?
house for 30 years. It was built 50 years ago, probably.
It was,
Probably
how long
not.
ago?
15
Didn't have the regulations back then.
No?
Started in the
No,
1970s.
Conservation Commission then.
Wetlands, wouldn't it start 94 or something like that?
I don't know, I have to
92?
sit, not that awfully long ago. I mean, see, I lose track of time sometimes, but it was something when we started it, it was pushed good. Everybody was getting them all the time. But then when they were coming back and there was nobody to put the papers back into the proper file, it kind of slipped a little bit. But all of the new ones, whether it was every subdivision or anyone with a new order of conditions for a new house, got it, at least the first person that moved in knew what it was.
You know, on the town maps, doesn't it say wetlands on them? But I don't think everybody gets it.
There is no official map in the town that can be used to accurately describe all of the wetlands. They may be 80% correct, but they're not correct. Even the better ones that DEP is putting out now aren't necessarily correct enough that you could use it on your lot. In other words, you could use it as a general area, but not as a specific area. In other words, you wouldn't want to try to draw the line in the ground as this is wetland and this isn't by
Yeah.
any map that we have.
Yeah.
It's just a
No,
very general thing.
That's done by plants, vegetation, hydraulics.
Yeah.
That's where you have to look at it with a study and design.
Again, one of the projects that was started, and again, for lack of people and time, was going through all of the paperwork that we have where these wetland lines have been done on the ground by professionals and putting them on the map. I don't know, if you've seen, I hope you haven't thrown them away, and maybe you did because you didn't know what they were. There were the books, the town assessors books.
Those are us.
There's some in there that, if you look and they have colored, looks like one of the first graders colored in different lots. Well, what it was people who were interested enough to go and find out where, from a notice of intent, where the lines were, transcribe it into these books and, and color them. This is,
Color the vegetation?
well, no, color the part of the lot that was wet. No,
Yeah.
so that when you open it up, this lot might tell you where the lines are. The one next door, if it hasn't been done, doesn't tell you anything. But at least what's in that book was accurate because it was taken off of a ground survey, not from a satellite or something
They
else.
can be totally wrong.
Right. But the satellite pictures are better. They're getting better all the time.
They are.
But they just can't always tell what the reflection is that they're getting when it comes back.
They'll be looking in our kitchen windows soon.
Well, we already
They
have.
already are.
Yeah. One more thing before we close, hint, hint. We were talking about trees, I was talking about trees with Rick, and I said, a couple of years ago, there was a bunch of cedar trees that were windblown at the park, that maybe we could consider replacing some of those.
this is what we really had our tree fund for. That was, the idea at the time was
Yeah.
to replace through the town, what we would call decorative
Well,
type trees.
those-
Though again, what we're planting them is, it needs to be done also, but that was part of what we figured on it. We need to, in that respect, is get a written, whatever we want to call it, so we start collecting our $10 a tree that we've been talking about and not doing because we don't have it as a written policy yet.
Where are you gonna get the trees?
We have some left over, so from Les.
we had them last time, the little North Atlantic, were they North Atlantic white cedars?
Yeah.
Yeah, down New
You're
Jersey.
planting small trees in that location, and the deer are there, you're going to
Yeah,
have to
they'll just
protect
eat
them.
Yeah.
No, you can protect them,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
protect them.
I'll tell you, the reason why it clicked in my head is because I don't know if anybody knows what a cedar waxwing is.
Yes.
I
It's
see the what?
Cedar
Bohemian?
waxwing.
Oh, Bohemian seed waxwing?
Well, that's a different species.
They come in.
I have some cedars on my property.
Yeah, and
The great
I've
wall
seen them
birds.
down, I've seen them at the park
Yep.
in the cedar trees. So there's hardly any left, so, we lost part of that. So if we can replace them, they'll come back.
This is an area that we need to do more work at. And what, just for her information, when we're talking about trees, we've had a general policy that whenever a tree was cut down that was in the jurisdiction of the wetland area, the person that wanted the tree cut down or took the tree down had a choice of either planting 3 more trees, small trees, or contributing $10 to the conservation tree fund, and then we would use that money to plant trees around town.
Oh,
And
I'll have to-
we've talked about it for
I'll have to
a
talk to
couple
my
of
neighbor
years, and
about that.
but I think we need to put it in the policy, and then we can buy decent trees. I know down where you're talking, you gotta buy some good, go out and buy some good trees.
Yeah.
And again, that takes you guys deciding which, or whoever's doing the project, what they need, and get some prices, and, we do still have some funds. We could have a whole lot more.
I'd like to propose some new business, not to be fully discussed here, but for the next meeting. But maybe we, as a board, we look into our current bylaw of the town and kind of modernize it to the year 2020. It's a new decade. I think it's something that needs to be done. I mean, we have kind of these things like the tree fund, but it's not in a bylaw. There's no
There's no teeth in it.
Right. There's no teeth that we can't apply to any the citizens of the town, and/or like it's $10. Well, someone said I'm not going to pay it. And honestly, $10 to plant a tree. I look at it.
Build your house.
Right. Well, the thing is, to me, it's like $10 may have worked in the '90s. It
Yeah,
might have worked
I-
in the '80s. I think we need to modernize the pricing to
They're
it.
like $300 now.
Right. If you were to buy
I've been looking at them.
actually a decent sized tree, not just something you would get
Right.
from a nursery. I mean, it's to define what it is. What is a replacement tree after you cut down a 12-inch tree or a 10-inch tree, 6-inch tree? Like, we need to make that a defining of like, if you cut down a tree in our wetland buffer, we expect you to plant X size tree,
Yep.
and that needs to be
Yeah,
determined.
so
We can
it's
work
the
with you.
diameter at chest level
Right.
professionally
Oh,
spoken.
That's, I see, I can understand that part. The other side of it is that if you have a trees a lot, and you go in there, you might be cutting 150 trees.
Right.
On the lot that are in the buffer zone.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't really control the buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to, you look at it, if they want to cut the tree, they can cut the tree. Because
Right.
it's not.
But if our bylaw
River or
says-
creek.
But if you make it so that it's
200
not, in other words, is it better to take 100 trees at $10
Mm-hmm.
and get it than it is to take no trees for the $100 because the guy's gonna take you to court
Right.
and you're gonna spend another $3,000 trying to get the thing down. If you make it low enough, nobody balks.
Right.
And there's enough trees being cut on every lot that's being built on. Or anytime there's a storage system put in, or something like that. It's not so much the big tree is get some trees going.
I have a suggestion. You know how your water bill has a step program?
Yeah.
Up to so many trees, this price.
Oh,
More
yeah, and
trees, drop the price.
That's why
'cause
you
it's-
need to put it into the.
I agree with what Ron said, that we need to keep putting it, we need an actual document, so we're not just blowing
Bylaw.
smoke in the air. That's all we've been doing. I've never seen
Yeah.
anybody buy trees or replace trees since I've been here.
Because that would have to go through the Board of
No,
Selectmen.
we have the right to set policies on some of these things and everything else. We can do it, it's all,
I think we need to
but we
set
can set a policy.
goal for this
That's-
year.
That's simple.
Right.
Then you can change it as you go.
Right.
But I mean, it needs to be written
needs to
down
start
simple.
somewhere. It has to
Maybe we go, guy coming in from Old Cart Path Lane, how many trees is they gonna cut for that project?
Right.
You think he's gonna balk at $10 a tree? No, but if you hit him for $300 a tree,
You see some of his permits?
well, I know, well, that's why, but I'm saying, yeah,
The
still.
cost of a home.
But it's the,
Oh, yeah.
it's the concept, right? I honestly, I think our bylaw, like, it should include the cost of actually operating this office. You know, if someone pulls a permit in town, and it's like, well, what's the cost to operate our office a year? All right, and we do it on average, X amount of permits a year, so let's say we want 50% of those permits to pay for the cost of hours, which is add hours to Melissa to work full-time, add some, you know, a buffer to get more scientists and, or even educational opportunities. I don't know what that whole cost is, but it's, to me, it's, if we have regulations that need to be enforced, but we don't have enough labor, or we can't cover the cost to do the labor, then something needs to change, which is, we're going into, like, the town's not interested in going a deficit because two developers want to develop a street or someone wants to build something, but it's like, all right, well, what's the cost of doing business? We have regulations, we have to be able to apply them. You know?
Hasn't
And
the
that
structure
cost
at
needs
all
to go on to
changed
someone.
with the new town manager?
Well, this is again, you're hitting on the other problem. We were in that position that we were not self-sustaining, but we were handling a lot of our work and getting in that. And what happened? The major town government found how well it was working and stepped in and took it all.
Is it possible to actually request to be?
Took all of our fees, all the fees away that we had been building up.
But a part of that bylaw, so if we would say the goal of 2020 is to write a bylaw, and it's not next month, but we say by December of 2020, we would like to revise the bylaw that would allow us to grant us autonomy over our funds and fees that we generate, that it does not go to general fund.
Right.
Because conservation is one of the things, we're not asking for funding, but our fees that are collected should maintain in conservation's hand, in our control. And why? Because people are interested in living in the town of Pembroke because we have great conservation land. But if we are not able to use it or not like maintain trails, because granted the money's going here, well that money can be used to this. It's like I make the analogy that conservation funds should be like hunting funds and rifle funds. Hunting and rifle funds under the Robinson-Pickman Act are that cost of doing business and hunting and fishing, that money stays within conservation. And I think the same thing should be applied to our wetland protection fees, our local filing fee. It should stay in conservation because then it allows us to open up our trails, create open space. Hey, we have a project, someone wants to make development. We say, you know what, we're okay with the development, you border open space. We'd like to put $10,000 if you can plan to put in 2 parking spaces so we have more access to open space. Because if you have open space that has no access or that's not usable, like the bicentennial trail, then why are we here? Because I think that, I mean, I don't really care about every septic project in town. I don't really care about, you know, if someone's going to build right next to wetlands, but I care that we actually have conservation land and we're able to use it. And that's why I'm kind of on both boards of conservation and open space, but I don't know if that's a goal that we want to do and how do we put that on the agenda and kind of spread forth and do a quarterly goals. If we want to do bylaw, all right, so we set up a plan of how we're going to do this bylaw, break it down into steps. and then each quarter we produce one chapter. You know, it's gonna take
The
a,
bylaw has to go before the town.
Bylaws
voted
to
in,
go
right?
down, but we can do other things without going there.
okay.
So we
You know,
could amend other laws.
It
that
all
exist.
depends how much bite you need into it. And this is
Mhm.
one of those things that, what we're saying, $10 a tree, nobody bought.
Mhm.
Nobody's gonna,
Yeah, but nobody
Not enough
put the money,
hand.
nobody put the money in either. I've never seen.
well,
any
no,
of
but
this
I'm just,
work.
I'm saying,
You know?
the thing, if you say to Joe, who comes in for his new house building permit, you've got 30 trees you gotta cut, I want $10, that's fine. But if you tell him you want $100 a piece for those 30 trees, he's gonna think 10 times more
Right.
about doing it.
And he's gonna
The
build a
first-
tree house.
Yeah, but the first
If they
time.
cut down
it's-
less trees, if
Yeah.
the price is
If he
up.
comes in and leaves a
That's
check
true.
for $300 and put
He
in
won't
the
cut
trees,
something down.
then you can well buy 5 trees for the dump, and it's
Yeah.
better than nothing.
I think
This
you need to
size.
compare it to like the region of the South Shore and then go out a better bit. I mean, in Cambridge, I think it's technically illegal to cut down any tree without conservation approval. And it's like, well, what's the cost in Cambridge? Cambridge is a little different price point, but if we can kind of, all right, here's our local towns, where do we stitch, where do other local bylaws look like? And then, I mean, maybe we don't do a bylaw changes here, but I think for this board, I think it'd be very good to know, you know, what we can do with the bylaw, what can we do without a bylaw, and like what are some of the things that actually give us teeth in this town, you know? And otherwise, it's like, I hate the gestation that, or that the gesture that, or the theatrics of coming to this board and, you know, something gets approved. It's either we know what we can do or we know what we can't do. And without that definition and being really clear, I mean, I've only been here for about a year, so, you know, slowly learning it, and there are ways.
We don't even have like a actual mission statement or a actual code of like of conduct and behavior. We have nothing.
Or, I mean, that part of that mission statement is to define what the goals are of this board. And that should require, you know, some public input. What does the town want, you know? People don't care about open space. I don't know, maybe they don't. They're like, yeah, just leave it, close it, don't let anyone hunt on it, I don't care. That was the,
Yeah, Steve,
Melissa, yeah, we gotta wrap this up,
Sorry.
but Melissa, in her spare time, maybe she could call other, I don't wanna say acting, assistant, agent, what's your title?
Administrative agent.
Administrative agents, and say, hey, what's your tree, do you have a tree policy? No.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that.
and again, I'm all for that, but I think you've been in and out of the office enough to know that
You can look
there
that
isn't a
up
whole lot of time that she
Yeah,
is sitting,
well-
and she's, it's depending, you know, what she is directed, and again,
Yeah.
I sometimes I say these things I really shouldn't say. Unfortunately, she isn't directed by us alone anymore, because of the changes that have been made
Yeah.
without our input at all.
Believe me, if she can't do it, she'll let you know.
Oh, I know, I realize, but what I'm saying is, you know, that,
I was just.
she has
suggesting
more
if we can't-
responsibilities
Yeah.
than just ours now, and yet we were the ones that have been yelling to get someone full-time in there because we needed it. Well, we've got someone in there who's looking out for us all the time,
I know.
but she has other things she has to do. And
Well,
Before
you
we
sit
close,
and watch, and I'm saying more than I probably should.
But before
But
we
if you
close it-
sit and watch what's going on in there, it's a good song, good concept. Because the people in town need to come through the door and have somebody to ask questions. Where do I go? What do I, simple questions. And in my head, there should be someone sitting right under by the stairway in a booth.
and what are
But
the-
what's the closest thing to someone sitting by the stairway in the booth? It's that door that's open, that's got a counter right off to the right. So you come in that door and you say to the girls, women, I'm sorry, women, no, can't say girls, that are there, someone has to talk to them. Well, the first thing is, if Melissa happens to be there, and she's busy on her desk doing conservation work, and someone comes to the counter, she has to look up, see them, get up and handle them, okay? She's lost concentration on whatever project she was working on. So now when that person leaves, it takes her a few minutes to get everything back in line
Yeah,
to start
I know.
doing it. So it's
I think she
poor
should
that
have
way,
that
but it's a
office.
good setup.
She should have that office behind her desk.
Yeah.
Are there any, like, just speaking hypothetically, a person comes in and they don't land, right, by conservation, it is a, say, a land that we've let them have a variance on so that they can